Hello, beautiful people. I hope that you have had a wonderful Advent and a Merry Christmas. Well, it's almost 2022, and that means it's a good time to look into the future and to describe some of the places where your church staff is going to be leading in the coming year. You know, since Bishop Graves appointed me here in 2018, well, a lot has transpired. We have made it together over some financial hurdles, and we have had some staff leaving and then new staff coming to join us. And, we've had a little global pandemic. So 3.5 years, it feels a little bit like we have been uphill hiking. Many of you know that I grew up in Tennessee, and one of the things that I miss the most from home is a mountain and hiking mountains. I went to college at Sewanee that has a 13,000 acre campus on a mountain plateau in the South Cumberland Mountains. And there's this one trail that goes up the side of the mountain, and it is a tough trail. It's very steep. And if you have been hiking very much, you know that uphill hiking, well, it's the least fun part of the journey. It can certainly be very beautiful, but because the landscape is tilted up toward your face, your horizon is very close and you are carefully watching the trail in front of you. But on this particular trail, if you stick with it, there's a pretty awesome payoff when you get to the top. The War Memorial Cross, which shines out over the valley below. And when you finally make it up there to the cross, you can turn around and you can see so far. The horizon has changed. And see, that's the reason why you did all of that tough hiking. So you could see a larger vista. And it sort of feels like this is where we are as a congregation. We have been through a lot. And I'm sure COVID is going to place a few more twists and turns in the trail, but it feels like to me that we could be arriving at some larger vistas. And the purpose of this video is to lay out some of my own vision for where I believe God is calling us to go and who God is calling us to be over these next years ahead. In other words, this is where I and our staff are leading in 2022 and perhaps beyond. There are 4 United Methodist churches here in our area and 2 others very close by. And in terms of the numbers, we are the smallest of the 4. And of course, there are lots of other churches that people could choose to connect with. So if people want to be Christian, and specifically a Methodist Christian, then why would people choose Mary Esther? When it comes to worship, other churches also offer excellent worship in both contemporary and traditional formats. Other churches are engaged in meaningful ministry and mission, just as we are. So why choose us? Every United Methodist Church has the same mission. It's right there in the Book of Discipline, to make disciples for Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. So the difference in churches is how disciple making and world transformation happens. So for myself, in my own prayers and reflections over the past 3 years about our church and about who I am as a leader and who I feel God calling me to be as a leader, there's one word that keeps coming to mind. And that word is deeper. Mary Esther may not be a bigger church than some others, but we are a church where people can grow deeper in relationship with Christ and in love with God and neighbor. If our church grows bigger, I'm fine with that, but not at the expense of growing deeper. And now that we've gotten to a higher place of vision, the horizon that I see God calling us toward is a church where it would really be difficult to maintain a superficial relationship with God, neighbor, and self. It would just be hard to do. And for 2022, I see this happening in 3 trails that kind of weave together and interconnect. Deeper relationships, richer learning, and thicker connections. So how are we going to embark on these 3 trails in 2022? I'm so glad you asked. One of the best ways to find a deeper relationship with God, self, and others is through worship, a primary activity of our congregation. And beginning in January, we're going to have a 9-sermon worship series called Free Indeed, Learning to Love God's Image in You with the Enneagram. Yes, the Enneagram. You may not have ever heard of the Enneagram before, but there are a couple of groups and your whole church staff that have been using the Enneagram as an important tool in our work together. It's more than a personality test. What the Enneagram does is it provides a window for understanding how God uniquely designed your authentic self, and for understanding how we develop a distorted sense of self in order to cope with life's wounds and painful circumstances that come our way. So it's a really excellent tool for spiritual growth and for self-understanding. Unlike other personality tools, the Enneagram is gospel-based and it's biblically sound. We're going to be reading a book together, so I encourage you to go ahead and purchase a copy of it. The title of the book is Self to Lose, Self to Find by Marilyn Vancil. It is a gospel-based approach to the Enneagram, and it is so good. Now, how can you use it? Well, obviously you can buy the book and read it and kind of follow along through our worship series. But it would also be great to use in a small group. So you could do that in your Sunday school class or some other group as well. It would be a fantastic way to accompany the worship series. Then when we get to Lent in 2022, we are going to be reading together Adam Hamilton's book called The Walk, 5 Essential Practices of the Christian Life. And as we go through our Lenten journey together toward Holy Week and Easter, this is a way for us to consider how our sense of discipleship could grow and deepen. Then once we get to Easter, we are going to take, along with the other 3 Methodist churches in our area, the Great 50-Day Challenge. 50 churches in our annual conference are taking the challenge over the course of the great 50 days of Easter to engage and connect with and make 50 new members in each congregation. That may seem like a bit of a challenge for the smallest of our Methodist churches in this area, but with God, all things are possible. So I encourage you to already begin thinking, who could you invite to church? Who could you ask to come to this worship series or our Lenten worship series? Those are great ways to invite people to join us on our journey. Then, of course, there are some other ways to deepen relationships, and one of the best ways is eating together. Beautiful people, I announce to you the recommencement of Wednesday night suppers on January the 12th. I can hardly wait. I'm delighted Monique Kokenauer has already begun coming up with menu ideas in her head, and we're going to be able to plan activities and different ways of being in ministry together for all ages on Wednesday nights. Oh, it's been so long and I can't wait. In 2022, I believe God wants us to provide richer opportunities for learning, and in particular, learning about the scriptures. For several years now, I've really engaged the materials from an online group called the Bible Project. The Bible Project has a singular focus, and that is helping people experience the Bible as a unified story that leads to Jesus. And in 2022, they are taking this rich set of videos and podcast episodes and blog posts, and they are focusing them into an app. The Bible Project app will be available after the beginning of the year when they're launching it. So they're beginning in January with a study on Genesis 1 through 11 that focuses on the Holy Spirit. So that's going to form the meat of what we'll use on Wednesday nights at 6 p.m. following our Wednesday night suppers. But then there's another opportunity that some others of us want to engage too. And it's called Bible Project Classroom. And this is a bit more like a graduate level Bible course. It's pretty intense, but it is so rich. Very, very good stuff. And we're going to begin with an introduction to the Hebrew Scriptures. There will be more learning opportunities as well, but this is how we're going to begin in 2022. And I believe God is calling us to thicker connections with our community and our world. Back in August, we launched a process called the Good Neighbor Experiment with the neighboring movement in Wichita, Kansas. And the Good Neighbor Experiment, we have formed a group around that, but it's been a very kind of free-flowing thing. We've had some people come in, in the middle of the process, and that is fine. You can join us at any time. So that process is going to continue through Easter. We started thinking about how to be better neighbors in our homes, where we live in the neighborhoods, where our domiciles are. And now we're beginning to move more toward the campus of our church. How can our church neighbors, how can we connect more richly with them? So we're going to be working toward discovering the needs and the assets, both in our congregation and in the community right around us through some really intentional processes. One of those is called the Gifts Garden. And we're going to be working on this both inside our church and outside our church. We're going to be exploring, we're going to get to know our members better, to discover what their gifts are. What do you, as an individual who's a part of Mary Esther United Methodist Church, what gifts do you have that could help meet somebody else's need? And the hope is that the church will become a connector, a place where people in our community that have needs and gifts can find one another and connect. Another avenue that I really want us to take a look at is our relationship with Pastor Gustavo and his ministry with children and youth in Aropoli, Honduras, that we support. They have a wonderful feeding program there, but they are making disciples for Jesus. So how can we thicken that connection that we already have with them? So now my question is this: where do you want to engage these trails? As you listened to the description of them, which ones piqued your interest? Which ones raised your eyebrows? Which ones made your heart beat a little faster? What are some ways that you could participate in these deeper relationships and richer learning and thicker connections? Well, there's a lot of different ways. You could host a small group in your home or here at church or even at a third place like a library or coffee shop. And both of the books that we're going to be reading in the first 3 months of 2022 would be excellent bases for a small group of your friends who are or are not connected to Mary Esther Church. Small group leader guides are available for the asking, so consider how you might be able to do that. The leader guide's going to give you everything you need. This is more like small group discussion, so it's not like you're having to do any leading or teaching. You can dive into the Bible Project. You could pre-register for their app. You could plan to join one of our Bible studies. You can come and enjoy one of our Good Neighbor Experiment meetings on Mondays at 6 p.m. We meet We eat together. We talk about how to build connections with our neighbors. It is fantastic. It's a wonderful group. And as we develop our gifts garden internally here at Mary Esther, we're going to be asking you to connect with us so that we can find out more about you, who you are. So respond to that invitation with joy. Beautiful friends, God has so much for us to see together in 2022, and I'm excited to blaze that trail with you. All right, love you. Have a happy new year. I'll see you soon.